In a couple of earlier videos, we did a couple of content on the oldest characters. In one we compiled the oldest ever humans of the Imperium, and in another we arranged the oldest space marines that ever lived, excluding the dreadnoughts and those tainted by chaos. So now here in this video we will do something a little bit different. We will discuss and list out the different lifespan of each race or species in the 40k galaxy, and also dive deep into the exceptions and the long-living individuals of each xenos race. So what do you say? Shall we get into it? Let's begin with the nascent naive Tau. These newly evolved species, relatively speaking, are also one of the shortest living species. Be it any of the castes, fire, earth, air or water, or even the ethereals, they usually die of old age at around 40 to 50 years, which pushes them to achieve technological wonders since they would work extra hard and extra fast to get to their goals before dying of old age. Although there have been advances in rejuvenation sciences, pushing the envelope of their life limits to 70 or 80. But there are consistencies here and there. For example, the 4th edition Tau Codex claims that Oshasera, trained alongside Oshova as a young fire warrior, although she is alive as of the year 999 of M41. And in the Star of Damocles, both Oshova and Oshasare were active during the Damocles Gulf Crusade in 742 of M41. This is a 250-year difference. This might be due to suspended animation or stasis technology though, but all in all the Tau do live shorter lives than most humans. As for the Tau Auxilia, the species in their empire, the Crude are one of the most prominent, also known as the Crude carnivores. These species undergo a rapid maturation phase, with their most significant growth happening within the first decade of their life. By the age of 12, they are considered adults, and some of these Crudes can live for over a century, but this is also still debatable. So as they age, their skin becomes more pitted and leathery, finally waning away in the last years. Another of the Tau allies is the Demiurge, which are essentially squads from the leagues of Votan that have come to work alongside the Tau and their empire. These kin or squads have been genetically enhanced to live longer lives than humans, so I would say they have a lifespan in the couple of hundreds of years. Now let's take a look at the greenskins, the Orcs. So for this species, if there's a crumpen, they be living. Now Orcs sprout from the ground from spores that are spread from their bodies. These Orcs are like mushrooms, and they grow at an astonishingly fast rate, which makes them really hard to get rid of. They fight to live and live to fight. They fight other races and themselves on equal opportunities, so the majority of them only live for a short period of time. If they are lucky or strong enough, they may even see a decade of glorious life. Quite often than not though, the oldest Orcs are usually the biggest of them all, since they always fight and they have to always win in order to survive. Hence the elders of the Orcs are the war bosses and warlords, with Gaskell, Mag Uruk-Thraka being the biggest and the baddest, therefore the oldest too. Gaskell's first exploits were noted to be 9 years prior to the beginning of the Second War for Armageddon in 941 of M41, and since he is still alive as of the 42nd millennium, that makes him around 100 to 150 years of age, and he is 6 meters or 20 feet tall currently. Now the Beast of Olonor was 30 feet or 9 meters, and he was alive in the 32nd millennium, and thus he would have been older going by the same logic. And the Crocs from the ancient times were stated to be 12 meters or 40 feet tall, and hence they are the oldest Orcs to have ever lived. So now, on to our favorite race. Of course, our own, our precious, the human race. The Grimdark is, as its name suggests, is grim and dark, especially for the majority of humanity. Most of the population of the human race is found in hive cities and in hive worlds spread across the galaxy. In the degrading and merciless environment of these claustrophobic biomes, people don't really live to a ripe old age, or they also age quickly. In hive worlds, humans have an average lifespan of around 40 years. Surprisingly, and this is for the lowly majority, the highborns or the elites, including the commissars and even the inquisitors, privy themselves to rejuvenation technology and treatments. That pushes their prime to a couple of centuries even. In other more civilized worlds though, like in the 500 worlds of Ultramar, people there, most likely than not, have lifespans that is normal around 70 to 80. On Terra, the birthplace of humanity, there exists the same disparity in lifespan, with the lowly ones living for a few decades, and on the other extreme, the High Lords of Terra are said to live for between 300 and 500 years. So those were the normal baseline humans. Now let's talk in terms of transhumans, as in the case of the Astartes, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Custodes, and the others. Starting with our poster boys, the Space Marines, they generally have a lifespan of between 300 and 500 years, with most of them dying in battle. The oldest chapter master as of the current era is Dante of the Blood Angels, who is 1500 years old. The oldest known Space Marine, however, that is known to have ever lived, without stasis, warp shenanigans being one of the fallen or trapped in Prospero, the oldest was Gravius of the Salamanders, and he died in M41, surviving for more than 10,000 years since the Great Crusade. So next we have the Adeptus Mechanicus, who are basically half robots, and they can extend their existence for centuries or thousands of years. The oldest of their kind is Belisarius Cawl, who is now around 11,000 years or more. The Custodes are a bit of a mystery. Some say they are biologically immortal, while others say they live for a couple of thousands of years. Either way, they live for a very long time. Then we have the Primarchs, who are considered biologically immortal as well, who although grow old in appearance, this is more of what they are feeling inside of them rather than their true demeanor. This is somewhat complex. Let's just say that they can be killed but are biologically immortal. And then lastly we have the Perpetuals like the Primarch Vulcan and the Emperor. These beings are both biologically and psychically immortal and can never be killed, except by a few weapons. Then we come to the race that resembles us to a large degree, the Eldar. These space elves are highly advanced technologically and psychically. They are taller and stronger than the average person. The Eldar are said to also live longer lives, with the average lifespan being in the centuries, being between 500 and 1000 years. These are stats after their fall from grace. The pre-fall Eldar from M29 and before that are stated to have advanced rejuvenate technologies that push their lifespans to tens or even hundreds of times of what it is as of now. So that means the pre-fall Eldar can live between 5,000 and 100,000 years, which makes them essentially immortal for all intents and purposes. But in the present era, Eldar that have lived beyond 1,000 years are considered old, and their bones would have begun to crystallize. Lord Elrond of 40k, or Eldrad Ulthran, is the oldest known member of the species, with him being stated to have witnessed the Imperium's birth and the Great Crusade of M30, which makes him around 12,000 years old, at least. And just as the other older specimens of his kind, his bones have now begun to crystallize. Now what about the twisted and horny Dark Eldar of Gomorrah? They bear the same genes as their Craftworld and Exodite kin, and therefore they would also have the same lifespans after the fall. But their lives are tricky. They have to keep on sacrificing more and more, and in more twisted ways as they grow older in age, so as to keep Slaanesh from devouring their souls. As such, most of them cannot survive past a few centuries, due to warfare, lack of sacrifice, and also the tumultuous homicidal nature of their home city in the Webway. As Drubel Vecht was an exception. He lived for around 10,000 years or so, as his earliest exploits was during the 32nd millennium, but he himself also stated that he had witnessed the fall of the Eldari, meaning that he was before the Imperium, meaning that if this was true, then he would at least be as old as Eldrad. Then we also have the Mandrakes within the Drukhari culture. These are enigmatic beings with powers that even the Dark Eldar cannot fully comprehend. Some speculate that they might be Psykers, a blend of Eldar and Demon, or maybe even living embodiments of the Shadow. This mysterious nature raises questions about their immortality, their independence from the need for souls, or even their possible immunity to Slaanesh's influence. Okay, now let's go to the Tyranids. These are a peculiar bunch of organisms. The Nits come from beyond the Milky Way galaxy, and they come into the setting with only one thing in mind: to consume, for they are the great devourer. They come in hive fleets divided into splinter fleets of lesser magnitudes. They need to travel light between star systems, so most of the bioships don't really contain bioforms within them that stay alive for a long time. They instead contain a huge amount of basic biomass. So when an invasion commences, the bioforms are generated from the biomass within the ships and in the mycetic spores. And after the invasion, they are either consumed back to the hive fleet or are converted back to biomass. Hence their lifespans are usually in the days or weeks. But there are exceptions to this. Old One Eye of Kelt is an old carnifex that persists in the planet long after the hive fleet behemoth had been vanquished by the Ultramarines. Old One Eye as of now must be around a century of age. Now another exception for the Nits are the Gene Stealers. The patriarch of these subterfuge Nits, the first of their kind in the worlds they infiltrate, can live for generations, and these generations are usually the same as human lifespans or human generations, since these successive Gene Stealer hybrids must adapt and live amongst the people without being suspected of being xenos. So the leader of their kind would most probably lead its flock in the hive worlds or the hive cities for decades and even centuries on end. So that's that. Now lastly, among the Nits, there is one bioform that stays alive throughout the years without being converted into biomass. This is the non-queen. And since she or they must direct and constantly commune with the hive mind, they are always required to be active and healthy. So the non-queens are essentially biologically immortal and can only be assimilated back into the hive mind, into the biomass, when all of the worlds in the galaxy are dead. Okay, so let's go to the long-lived soulless Necrons. Well, before the biotransference process, they were a species that had a short lifespan. They were called the Necron tier. They had short lifespans due to the lack of SPF 15 sunscreen lotions. This isn't a joke. They were literally dying of radiation from their suns. So after being tricked by the Catan into trading their souls for robotic necrodermis existence, the Necrons, as they would be known till now, became immortal entities. All of them, including the Silent King, a Trazyn who woke up way before any of them, and the ones who still dormant inside the tomb worlds, all of them are more than 60 to 65 million years old. They would not and could not die, and they can only decay slowly due to time. Okay, let's end this with a little talk about chaos. The ruinous powers all have a beginning, and at the same time they have always existed. Slaanesh, for example, the Prince of Pleasure, was born during the fall of the Eldar race, in somewhere between the 29th and the 30th millennium, and thus he or she would have been the youngest. But since time is irrelevant in the warp, Slaanesh has always existed. Time here isn't linear as it is in real space. Time in the warp is a loop within a loop around a circle bending over a pentagon and twisted into a hoop. So there is literally no beginning and no end, and thus the demons, gods and other entities of the warp have no specific lifespan, which explains why the traitor legions as well and the Chaos Marines that betrayed the Imperium during the Horus Heresy 10,000 years ago are still active and about in the 42nd millennium, at least the ones that were alive since then. There are new ones that have been recruited. So lifespans here don't really have a definition at all. So with that, we come to the end of this video on the lifespan of all the 40k races or species and their oldest characters. Okay, side note, the old ones are said to live for billions of years, and also the Catan, the star gods, they have existed since the beginning of the universe. So if you like this video, then watch this other one as well, and if you want to browse for other Warhammer content, then check out our channel. Subscribe, like for support, and bang that bell icon for notifications. Till the next time, take care, boys.